So I just would like to introduce Emily Markowitz. She's going to give a talk called Reproducible Reports in R Markdown, Perspectives, and NMFS Reports. Just a little bit about Emily. So she's a research fisheries biologist in the Eastern Bering Sea Survey Team and the Groundfish Assessment Group at NOAA's Alaska Fisheries Science Center in Seattle, Washington. So take it away, Emily.
Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here. Yeah, I just started here, and it's really great to be here. I'm going to talk today a little bit about some thoughts and some things I've put together over the past couple of years about writing reports in R Markdown for NOAA and all the cool work that we do. So I'll start with like a little bit about myself. I'm an East Coaster. I just moved here in the middle of the pandemic and got a new job, which is really exciting. Before I came here, I was actually working at NOAA's Office of Science and Technology, or NOAA Fisheries' Office of Science and Technology in Silver Spring, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. And now I'm here in Seattle, Washington, working on groundfish assessments, and actually even get to go up and see those assessments, do those surveys in person on boats like the fishing vessel Vester Island, and I'll actually be there in about 2 weeks to go and catch some fish. And for both of these positions, I have been tasked with writing a lot of reports. The government is famous for the number of reports that we write, and I'll get into exactly how hairy that was before, but this story really starts with a task I had to redevelop, rewrite, reimagine the fisheries economics of the U.S. report. This is like a pretty big deal report. It's annual, high level. The numbers that get published in it get used in a lot of different ways. I even gave a talk about how I redeveloped this into R Markdown at a DC Saturdays talk in 2020. If you guys want to look, that's a hyperlink. So put these R Markdown documents together and built a structure and came up with sort of best practices for myself. And it's like, okay, yeah, well, I'm going to make it like a little Emily's favorite functions package, right? And that's going to help me in my future report writing and make it more efficient. And as I was putting that together, I was like, you know, like, actually, this could be useful to a lot of other people. And there's, you know, we're a government agency. We write a lot of reports. I'm clearly not the only one doing this. So I built my NMFS reports package. So that way it could be used by, built upon, and leveraged by others, whether they're my coworkers or farther beyond. And so you can imagine that in the federal report writing process, right, first we collect data. We're a science agency, so data is our cornerstone. And then the subject matter experts determine those data caveats. And finally, as a report writer, it would get to me, and I would be collecting the bits and pieces of broken stuff that should go into this report that no one ever documents, but the person who was before me knew every step of the way, right? The classic not reproducible process. And finally, you give it back to the subject matter experts. Then designers and 508 compliance experts get their hands on it and update it and find errors and go backwards and forwards. And then you get to people who make a lot more money than I do, who sign off on this report, send it downtown, leadership reviews and approves, and it's finally rolled out to the public. So there's a lot of steps here, and report editors only even doing one part of this. But imagine in a tidy world where they did a majority of this process, from collecting, like from accessing that data to using it, to manipulating it, to analyzing it, to visualizing it, to creating a product that can be used by report editors immediately to get downtown in not 3 years, but maybe like in a month or two of your time or less. Incredible amount of turnover time reduced. So that's where my NMFS reports package comes in. As I said, right, this is something that I started for myself, and then I have been developing to make it more friendly to others. So it's definitely a work in progress, and I want to hear anything and anyone's perspectives on how to make it better. And so, you know, it's not a final piece, and something like Julie said, you know, we share our imperfect work because it helps us make it all better. So that's what I'm doing today. when I was building this package, I had sort of like these 6 tenets of what I thought was important to focus on. So data download automation, streamlining the report creation, consistent grammar structure, which can be a tricky thing if you're not prepared for it, built-in 508 accessibility, version control through GitHub and Google Drive, or even your internal VPN, and then also making that product that you create flexible for other products that you're going to have to create or support with the content that you prepare in this report. So in doing that, I came up with this 3-step program, so to speak, of installing, building, and running. And I actually put together a quick little video, which will show us a little bit about how that is done. So in this, I've already installed my NMFSReports package. Easy done, pretty quick install. I hope for everyone else, it certainly is for me. And then I build my report. So like any report, it's got different sections, like an abstract or introduction. In this case, history and methods. Has authors. In this case, it's me, myself, and I. A report title, and this is I'm mocking it from a data report that I'm building here at Alaska Fisheries Science Center for our survey data. And then I've got these, you can see in the lower right, these sort of helper functions that do a lot of the grunt work, and then these style documents that help us style the report in the way that we want it to ultimately look. And the real crux of what this program does, besides building all this architecture in these files, is that it builds this run file. And so at the top of your run file, right, I've already put in that metadata that is so important to keeping track of who works on what, when, and where. The idea of a run file is that it's the only thing you should touch, right? So you can download the same data, you're going to do this the same, that the same, but really it's the year, the species, that kind of content that's going to change. And then for each of those sections, I now have a section area that runs that section. And so if I want to loop through a section so I can get, the results for each species of this thing, doing that analysis, it's pretty easy to manage that from here. And then at the end, I came up with an interactive way to save all of our content, figures and tables and so forth. That are important to reports. And then after doing all this work, right, in under a minute and a half, I'm already running a code, one line of script that's running my R script that is starting to develop my content. And so in my output folder, I have today's date and a folder called chapters where all of this content is being saved. There's also a folder to keep your figures and tables organized, and also a naming structure and built-in background stuff that's making sure that your files are in order and appropriately being taken care of. I'll actually skip ahead. And you can see that we get to the end of building our report in a few tens of seconds later, and I've got each of the sections of my report. I even have a PowerPoint that I've already developed. So let me go to the next slide, maybe. So when I developed this, right, I have like an example document to show people how to use it, interact with it, and it creates a report that looks like a report. That's our Times New Roman, boring tech memo background, but you can do something more fun, like in the picture here. This is actually the template that I have, and it's a little more colorful and interactive and engaging for the public to use. And I know that there are HTML templates out there and PDF templates out there that are really great, but here at NOAA, we're really not there yet. We're really focused on using these Office templates because that's what our report editors, our designers, and our communication team are prepared to work with. I know a lot of groups who have tried to do PDF and HTML products, and it breaks the chain. It's not really prepared for it. These are really regulatory and scientific-based reports, and yeah, I think that they'll be changed in the future. But for right now, this is a really great starting point. And like I said, I also produced a presentation. I just picked the first figure in the first table, and it's got my title slide and our authors, and you can start to build that out pretty easily once you already have the template and like a script template on how to use it. We're going to show the same thing, every year maybe, or depending on what's important. In terms of helping the report be more streamlined and direct, I also put together a package down page, which you can all access. That's the link on my GitHub. And you'll see that all my functions are there. There are examples for each function, descriptions. In terms of making that consistent grammar structure, I have like a couple of favorite functions I've put together, like this function called pchange, right? So if you have an 8% increase or a 9% decrease, this function is intelligent enough to understand that 8 starts with E, therefore should be with it. And those are the kinds of functions that could save someone a lot of time in a lot of ways. And then, of course, I've also built a couple of vignettes that are sort of my like testing, like proof of theory, where I put in the code of how I think this should be used, how I anticipate it being used, and then I see if that's what my colleagues are also doing, and try to update and work with that, because whatever I produce is something that they should also benefit from. I really believe that if we share our work, we do better work. So this is my way of contributing to that effort. The beautiful thing about our Markdown documents is that you've got all of these YAML elements that it can be built in. So here I have a citation style guide, and that defines like how my citations are written in my report, and you can change that. And I've got, as you might recall from that second step function, where I actually build the infrastructure, you can choose what your citation style is. Likewise, I also was able to build in my bibliography. So now I can have my bibliography content in here that belongs to this report. And kind of touched on this before, but I can have these different style guides. And so you can see this Times New Roman, boring, tech memo-y kind of thing. And then this much more engaging, public-facing kind of style. In terms of 508 accessibility, it's something we talk a lot about here. It'll talk a lot about here at NOAA and obviously in other groups in government. And something that's really important to me. I'm dyslexic, and I've benefited from people making reports accessible, right? Being able to search for stuff, being able to find headers, colors and fonts that are easier to read. That is an active part of my life. So it's something that I think about, and I try to integrate into my workflow as much as I can. So here, right, I've got a style guide that is trying to pick colors and fonts that are more accessible and easier to read, as well as the fact that our Markdown just sort of naturally, like, you have to use this header, paragraph, footnote structure instead of what a lot of people typically do is they just make the font bigger and they're like, oh yeah, I remember this is size 12 and like this is a bold. No, it is defined, it can be used, and it's consistent. And that's really important for screen readers and screen tags. And so, you know, after making one report like this Fisheries Economics of this Fisheries Economics of the US report, I can produce a lot of other reports and use that content to help others with their endeavors, like working on the saltwater recreational fisheries snapshots, right? That's not produced by Office of Science and Technology, that's produced by Sustainable Fisheries. And so they come knocking on my cube and ask me for the content from this report. And I say, oh, that's okay. I already uploaded it to Google Drive and you have it, it's done. And then they don't have to ask me for it anymore. It's an understanding that they need this content and they have it. Also for the fact sheets and infographics, I can make content that produces, write script that produces content that's specifically for that, or make graphics that are more more geared towards that effort. And then there's an online web tool, which isn't in Shiny, but I have made a lot of suggestions that it should be. So, and you can imagine that all of this work that I've done, all this progress that I've made is great. Is being used to produce a lot of products here at Alaska Fisheries Science Center, like that data report for our Eastern Bering Sea survey trawl, and a lot of others, and hopefully save me and my colleagues and our amazing work a lot of time. So I want to say thank you. Thank you all for listening and coming to my talk. If you want to reach out to me, you can either get to me via GitHub or Twitter, or my email is there as well. I also want to promote two other talks that are being given here today at the conference. Talk I'm on actually later about teaching your colleagues R that Shantae Davis is giving, and then a digital track talk by my colleague Diana Dishman about how we can use how helping regulatory teams work better together is so important, and she was able to do that in her group. Thank you all. Have a great rest of the conference, and I will hopefully get to connect with you all, at least virtually, if not maybe one day in person.